Alright, YouTube, increasingly it's necessary for people to defend legitimate whistleblowing activities because we have a political party right now that's attempting to use like Red Scare McCarthyist tactics against them. I'd point out here, during the last couple years of the Bush administration, when Wikileaks began dropping material pertaining to the various war crimes of the Bush-Cheney regime, all the people on the left, including people like Obama and Clinton, applauded them, thought that it was great, thought that it was a service to all mankind, called it whistleblowing, which it is. Now, of course, they're attempting to cast this same exact organization and the same people associated with it as enemies of the American state simply because they happen to be reporting on Hillary Clinton's various scandals, which is why they're doing that. I mean, it's obviously a political tactic. I thought it was important to point out, though, when I talk about WikiLeaks, I am a frequent critic of Russia. I do not support the Russian state. I don't support Vladimir Putin. I think that he should be hanged by his own people. That being said, the Russian state is not the boogeyman of old. The Cold War is still in full force. The grand chessboard never went away. The Cold War didn't magically end because Russia emerged out of the flames of what had been the much more powerful USSR. That's all a bunch of bullcrap. In that sense, yes, Russia is still an antagonist on the world stage. Mutually assured destruction is the only thing preventing a nuclear war. Eventually, I see it breaking down in a nuclear war, enveloping most of the northern hemisphere of the world in radioactive ash. That could be wrong, but unfortunately I expect that to happen within the next 50 to 100 years, certainly. I think we're living on borrowed time, essentially, on a day-to-day basis. I don't think people quite realize that. But that being said, just because Russia opposes parts of our doctrine, parts of our existence, just because they would probably nuke us off the face of the earth if they had a chance to do so without us retaliating, and we'd do the same to them. Unfortunately, DC and the Kremlin, essentially. Just because that's the case doesn't mean that every time something goes wrong within U.S. politics, the Russians are involved. How wonderful it would have been if George W. at the time had thought up the brilliant tactic of blaming Russia for the leaks that revolving around Gitmo or something like that during his administration, some of his own foibles at the time. How wonderful it would have been if every time something was leaked in an administration, they immediately deflected and blamed some foreign state for their problems. And that's what we see happening now. Obama's administration has supplied not one single shred of evidence that the Russians had any involvement from the top down in what's happening to the Clinton campaign with the Podesta emails, among others. I've already pointed out, arguing devil's advocate here, even if we could prove involvement, even if they could show us solid and clear evidence that that was the case, why would we then not say, possibly, just maybe, it's because they're afraid of Hillary Clinton starting a nuclear war? When I read through the Podesta emails and I see her talking about ringing China, claiming the Pacific Ocean being a possibility, renaming it the American Sea, and then ringing China with anti-missile systems, I say, yeah, that'd probably be a little bit of a provocation to a major nuclear power. I can only imagine what her true opinions on Russia involve, considering that they're a bigger adversary than the Chinese and a little bit less restrained at times. So, while I may begrudgingly agree with some parts of that doctrine, I see no problem with deploying anti-missile systems. And in fact, the sole and only way that we can break down mutually assured destruction without actually being destroyed is through anti-missile, anti-air technology being mass deployed. It'd have to be very effective, and it'd have to be very numerous, and it'd have to be stationed in 1,000 places at once. But it is possible to do. It would still, cause billions of casualties, but the world would eventually recover a lot faster than in a full nuclear exchange. It's rather regrettable that we've gotten to that point. I find it very funny that people that are talking about openly provoking one of our major trading partners, China, over the South Sea disputes by proclaiming that it's possible to claim the entire Pacific Ocean just because we have the projective force to adequately defend it, and that is technically true. I find it very funny that that person would then call her opponent immoral for having a tape where he's talking about grabbing pussies 10 years ago. It seems like one of these things is not like the other. It seems like one of them could lead to billions of people dying, and the other one led to nobody dying. I'll just put that out there. But I don't believe that the Russians were involved at all. I think when you look at the last two arrests in the last few days, involving people attempting to hack on behalf of Wikileaks or hack in order to get material to give to Wikileaks, because Wikileaks doesn't conduct its own hacking, it simply compiles and releases material that they've been given that they think appropriate to release. And before, in the past, they have redacted material too when they've released it to try to protect people. Which the government has so far in the last year or so completely ignored that they did that as a service to our government. It's actually rather funny that they'd think of them as traitors or espionage agents or something. Two of those hackers were in North Carolina, and they have no links to Russia. Another one was a teenager from Great Britain, had nothing to do with Russia. I find it very, very funny because some part of the public, I think a minority at this point, has gobbled up the story that the Russians are involved. Now, thankfully, it looks like the majority of the public doesn't believe the story because it's the clearest form of deflection. And even some of those that do believe the story don't care because they see it as shooting the messenger. And an attempt by people like Clinton or Donna Brazile or Podesta to deflect from the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of scandals in this material. We've got part 9 of the Podesta emails dropped today. And they're going to run out of Podesta material. What do you think they're going to start dropping after that? You think it'll be less damaging? No, I think it'll be more damaging. I think that by the end of October, they'll be dropping stuff from within the Clinton campaign a little bit higher up than just the chair. I think it's going to come from Hillary herself. I think they've got all sorts of goodies that they haven't even bothered mentioning. Right now is the boiling the frog period, so to speak, where they're just slowly draining away her force. Trump has begun to rise in the polls again. I'll be doing a video on that. And Clinton's making, in these leaks, she appears to make more and more strange statements. This thing about discovering Japan and ringing China is pretty bad when you've already got essentially a Cold War scenario going on in the world. You intend to antagonize another nuclear state that could provide a counterbalance to your main opponent or your main adversary or competitor or whatever you want to term them. And the final funny part, I would say, and I've said this a couple of other times, but remember, this is the same Russia that in 2012, when Mitt Romney spoke of Russia being our main adversary, when asked in I believe, the second presidential debate, Obama came out and said, no, they're not an adversary. The Cold War is over. You're living in la-la land. You're living decades ago. They're just a competitor on the world stage. Our main problem is, I think he said, North Korea or Iran, or I can't remember what nation he pointed out. It's very telling because Clinton appears to have completely reversed that. She's actually taking up the same tack as Mitt Romney, which, again, considering what Mitt Romney has said during this election, it makes a little bit more sense. It's quite clear. The neocons, along with Hillary Clinton, who is basically, neoliberals and neoconservatives are the same thing. They're not different. They all agree, fundamentally, yes, we should be continuing the Cold War proxy conflicts because they make us a lot of money. And hopefully, eventually, in the future, maybe we can outmaneuver our foe. But is there really even a reason? For those that are propped up by banks that make a huge amount of money by causing discord, for those that are propped up by arms dealers, by those that are propped up by all of these corporate industrial groups that have ties to these various militaries, why would they want the Cold War to end? They've made a lot more money since the Cold War began. Why the hell would they want it to end? The only positive impact of the Cold War is human technology insofar as things like computers and flight and things like that go, or fuel efficiency. Those are the only positive effects, but if we had perhaps a slightly more enlightened societal arrangement around the world today, maybe a freer market where people aren't so overburdened that they can actually do these experiments on their own with these various things without having to pay millions of dollars for a license or get some knockback grant from the government, we'd probably be advancing faster and we wouldn't even need nuclear weapons to do that. But the cat has been out of the bag for decades now. It's not going back into the bag. It's not going anywhere. We are under mutually assured destruction. Grand chessboard is in play. We are in a Cold War. We never stopped being in a Cold War. People need to remember that. I see Russia as our main adversary in the world. I don't have a problem with the Russian people. I have a problem with Putin. I have a problem certainly with the oligarchs that are backing him. But the fact that I'm a critic of Russia, the fact that I don't approve of many of their policies, I think that there are a very slim number that we should honestly import here, like giving martial training in school and forsaking gym class. I think that's a great idea. Telling people that they, instead of casting a frown upon people who prepare for a survival situation, encouraging it or at least remaining silent when people choose to do so. That's a good idea. Those are great ideas. Most of the fiscal situations over there, including Putin pretending to be charismatic strongman and forcing corporate heads to sign some deal when they fired somebody Putin liked or something like that. No, it's a bunch of bullcrap. It's the same big stick mentality that stops working when you consider the fiscal arrangements that are actually backing some of these political heads. This isn't the early 1900s. Putin is not Teddy Roosevelt. He's not actually interested necessarily in the livelihood of his people beyond using them as brute labor and propping up his own fortune as a consequence. But that does not mean that Wikileaks is involved with or controlled by the Kremlin. It doesn't mean that Russian hackers were the ones who gave them this material. And until Obama or Clinton or somebody else within the Democratic Party is willing to provide evidence, not a claim, not, oh, the security apparatus says, actual proof that that's who was responsible for these leaks, I'm going to continue disbelieving them, and I encourage everybody else to do the same, because if they had evidence, it seemed like a no-brainer to release it. It would take care of their problem. It would completely take care of the WikiLeaks issue that Clinton's campaign is having if they could supply us with even a shred of evidence, not even full proof, but just a little bit of even circumstantial evidence that the Russians were involved in even some of these hacks. But they can't do that because the Russians probably weren't involved. It probably had nothing to do with them. It was probably U.S. hackers. Or because the system was so poorly secured, they just don't want to admit to the fact that some random person, some script kiddie, maybe still in high school for all they know, managed to access their system and grab all this stuff and give it to WikiLeaks. Maybe they were a partisan, maybe they're an anarchist. Who knows? They don't apparently know, because they can't give us any evidence that their claims are true. So I'm going to ignore it completely. I'm going to assume that WikiLeaks is totally blameless, and that the reason why they're not leaking a bunch of Trump material is his systems were better secured. And it's as plain as that. That's what I think about that. That's about all. Peace out.